Today I want to discuss how to solve radical equations and inequalities. This is going to be page 69 in your notebook in the year 2020. In future years it may change. This is Student Journal page 140 to 142 if you have these pages. If you don't, that's okay. You can just write down the notes and then put just notes from notebook paper in your notebook. A radical equation, of course, is an equation that contains a radical, and you're going to have radicals like square root, cube root, fourth root. So an equation that contains a radical. And sometimes they'll have two radicals, and you'll have to do the process here, the how to solve, you'll have to do that twice. We will encounter that problem. And then an extraneous solution just happens to be a solution that will not satisfy the equation. Okay. How to solve. The first thing you're going to do is just isolate the radical on one side if necessary or possible, because sometimes it's not possible. The next thing you're going to do is raise each side of the equation to the exponent to the same, to the same exponent as the root of the radical to obtain a linear, quadratic, or other polynomial equation. Notice I have this little star. If you have an even root, once you have isolated your radical, then the number on the other side of the equal sign has to be positive. If you have an odd root, it doesn't matter, because you can cube an odd number and still get an odd number, or raise an odd number to the fifth power and still get an odd number. But you cannot ever raise a negative number to an even power and get a negative answer. So if you have an even root and the number on the other side is not positive, then there's no solution to that problem. So let's go through and look at these examples that I have. I have many of them, so this will probably be a two-part, maybe a three-part video for solving radical equations. So we're going to solve and then check your solutions. You always want to check to make sure that you don't have an extraneous solution. Okay, so when I look at this, my radical square root of 1 minus x is alone on the left side, and my constant is alone on the other side. So I'm going to raise both sides to the second power. That will get rid of the square root. The square root of 1 minus x times the square root of 1 minus x is 1 minus x. 7 to the second power is 49. Then I'm going to subtract 1. Negative x will equal 48. Divide by negative 1. X will be negative 48. Then I want to check that before I circle it and say it's the answer. 1 minus negative 48 is 1 plus 48, which is 49, and the square root of 49 is 7. So that is the correct answer for number 1. For number 2, I've discussed this negative sign already, so I want you to think for a moment, is this one going to be no solution, or am I going to be able to continue? I would look at my root of my radical. Is this an even root or an odd root? A 3 is an odd root, so then that means that it does not matter that this number is negative. I can proceed now that I have my radical on one side and my number or constant on the other side. I can raise both sides to the third power. The cube root of 5x plus 1 cubed is 5x plus 1. And negative 4 cubed is going to be negative 64. I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. I'll have 5x equals negative 65. Divide by 5. X will be negative 13. Let's check it to make sure. 5 times negative 13 is negative 65. Negative 65 plus 1 is negative 64. And the cube root of negative 64 is negative 4. So that is my answer. Now number 4 looks strange. My radical is not alone. I've got multiplication of 1/4 with it, and I've got adding 6. So just like when solving an equation, you work backwards. Get rid of this 6 first. (10 minus 6 is 4. How do I get rid of multiplying by 1/4? Multiply by 4. So that would go away. I've got the 4th root of 2x equals 16. And now my radical is alone. I can raise both sides to the 4th power. Oh, I don't know what 16 to the 4th power is. Pardon me as I reach for my calculator. 256 times 256, whatever that is. $65,536. So 2x is going to equal 65,536. I'm going to divide by 2. So then x is going to equal 32,768. So I'm going to bring that calculator in here so we can check this. I want to multiply that by 2, which of course gives me that 65,000. And then I want to take the 4th root of that. So to take the 4th root, what I do is, think about it for just a moment, I press 4. Here's where you use a root of any, like this is the xth root. So 4, second the caret button, and that says 4th root of. And then the answer that I just had on the screen, so I'm going to do second negative sign, so that's the answer I just had. The 4th root of that is 16. And then I'm going to multiply 16 by 1/4, which I know it is 4. And I'm going to add 6 to that, and it should equal 10, and it does. So that is the correct answer, and I showed you how. I'll show you again really quickly. If you need to find a root other than square root, which square root is above the x squared, you press second x squared. If you need to find the cube root of 64, for example, then you type the root that you want to use, the second button, the caret button, which brings up the xth root, which means cube root now, of 64. Press equals, and that's the cube root of 64, of course, which is 4. Okay, moving on to number 4. I need to get my cube root alone, so I'll divide by 2. I'll have the cube root of 13x minus 5 equals 5. Then I may raise both sides to the 3rd power. So 13x minus 5 equals 125. Solve for x. That's 130. Divide by 13. X is 10. And then let's check it. So 10 times 13 is 130. 130 minus 5 is 125. The cube root of 125 is 5, and 5 times 2 is 10. Okay, yes, that is correct.